espero estar errado no que estou dizendo aqui agora, a gente se iludiu com o Vinícius Júnior.
Não sabe fazer gol. O Vinícius Júnior.
Burro! O Neguebinha 2017? O Vinícius Júnior lá. Ele não é todo esse jogador que a gente imaginava que ele fosse.
Mas eu acho que não vale 150 milhões. Eu acho que não é esse fenômeno todo.
Vocês acham que o Vinícius Júnior é o novo Pelé? Não é! Ele não sabe nem chutar bola. Ele é da base, ele não sabe chutar bola. A verdade é essa. Doa quem doer.
So, listen to this. I feel like most people don't know this, but when Real Madrid signed Vinícius Júnior from Flamengo, the common opinion in Brazil was that Real had gotten scammed. People were calling it the biggest heist in football history. Back then, it felt like no one in the country rated him. They didn't even think he was good enough to play in Brazil, let alone Real Madrid, but that leaves the question, why exactly did Real Madrid sign him? I mean, when the contracts were done, Vinícius had only played one single game for Flamengo and it wasn't a good one, but forget the fact he had made a mess every time he touched the ball. Real Madrid based a €45 million decision on just 13 seconds of high-level action. That's all the possession he had that day. They made him the most expensive underage player in history after 13 seconds on the ball. You gotta admit, it does sound insane, but there's an explanation. Vini was always supposed to have ended up at Barcelona. Look, the kid was absolutely dominant at youth level. He had been compared to Robinho since the time he was 11. The year after that, they even bumped him up to the under-13s, hoping the older kids would be able to put up some competition, and instead, not only did he instantly become their star player, but he led his team on a run of 90 matches without a defeat, becoming so notorious all across the country that Corinthians came in, trying to steal him away from Flamengo with an offer described as completely out of touch with reality. As much as Flamengo kept telling him to, take things easy, follow Neymar's footsteps, stay in Brazil for a while, there was no stopping him. The next summer, he joined Brazil for the Under-15 South American Championship, and after 6 goals and 5 assists in just 5 games, not only were they champions, but European scouts were already swarming him like vultures. And then, having only just turned 16, Vinícius led his team to the Under-17 Carioca, defeating Vasco 10-1 in the final, and then joined the Under-18s for the prestigious Copinha and outshined everyone, meaning suddenly, Barcelona went all in for his signing, offering Flamengo the $30 million they defined in his release clause. Go read any newspaper from back in the day and they were all claiming Vinícius was already a Barcelona player. Even his old agent went on to tell the press that Vini was a massive Barcelona fan, that he had cried watching their comeback against PSG. But then, the Under-17 South American Championship started and everything changed. From the beginning, Vinícius was all over the pitch, and once Brazil made it to the final stage, not only did he come up clutch with 5 goals and 2 assists, but he made sure to steal the spotlight every time, either lobbing the keeper, putting it between his legs, or outright scoring the goal of the tournament. At one point, even lobbing 3 players in a row to make sure that alongside the Golden Boot and the title of South American champion, he'd also take the Player of the Tournament award. By the end, he had the 3 biggest newspapers in Spain talking up how Barcelona had already secured the transfer of the next Neymar. And let me tell you one thing, Real Madrid weren't making the same mistake again. If once they had allowed Neymar to slip right between their fingers and straight into the Camp Nou, this time they were looking for revenge, and the message was simple. Wherever Barcelona are willing to pay, we will pay more. So once he debuted for the first team a couple weeks later and the whole thing turned out to be a disaster, it wasn't even that they were excusing his performance on the basis that he was still only 16. They were just hyper-focused on making sure they beat Barcelona to this signing, to the point where they actually got Flamengo to renew Vini's contract just so they could increase his release clause, allowing Real to outbid Barcelona. When the move was announced, everyone's jaws dropped to the floor. $45 million for an unproven, unknown 16-year-old. Only 2 Brazilians had ever demanded that much money, Neymar and Kaká. So now, to the eyes of the public, he had no choice but to play as well as them. But that just didn't happen. 3 more substitute appearances came and nothing. Then they tried to put him in the starting 11, and the only thing that achieved was attracting even more attention to the fact that things were going wrong. And suddenly, even Mundo Deportivo was reporting that Real Madrid's €45 million man kept disappointing. 5 matches later, Vinícius was already getting dropped, and still, it was only 2 months later that he hit the lowest moment of his career, being subbed in the 75th minute, only to be subbed out before the game was over, becoming the biggest joke in the entire country. From this moment on, there were no limits on how far pundits were willing to go to make fun of Vinícius. It was no longer that they were claiming that his decision-making needed some work. They were outright calling him dumb on live TV. There were people arguing that he would never even put on the Real Madrid shirt, that they'd soon realize their mistake and sell him off for cheap. But the worst thing that happened to him was still the nickname they got him. Look, I'm guessing most of you don't even know what I'm talking about, but long story short, a few years before this, there was this kid called Negueba who got bumped up to the first team at Flamengo and got really hyped up by their fans, only to start underperforming so much that he became a meme. From that moment on, whenever people wanted to say that a player was bad, they didn't say it plainly like that anymore. They said it was a Negueba. His downfall was so harsh that by the time he had turned 25, he was already down in the second tier, and according to seemingly everyone, Vinícius was the new Negueba. So much so that they stopped calling him Vini and nicknamed him Neguebinha, the little Negueba. And I mean, something like that could break any player, but to Vinícius, it felt almost like a wake-up call. The very next game, Vini didn't just score twice, he was the man of the match and he made sure there were 2 beautiful goals, even dribbling the keeper for the second. And even though that obviously wasn't enough to change everyone's minds, 2 months later, it happened again. Vini came in late against rivals Fluminense with his team trailing behind in the South American Cup quarterfinals. And not only did he put in the ball that leveled the match, but won the free kick that put them ahead, completely flipping the game on its head, leading one of the commentators to say that this kid is a normal, 17 years old and making the difference like this. He's standing up to everyone who said he didn't have it in him to become a world-class player. This was his trial by fire. And much thanks to that game, next season, the club finally started taking him seriously again, and it paid off. In the first 2 matches of the season, Vini first scored and then assisted their only goals. 3 weeks later, he scored in the semis and then in the final of the Guanabara Cup to lead Flamengo to their first trophy of the season. And less than a month after that, with Flamengo trailing 1 goal behind Emelec, Vinícius was given his Libertadores debut 67 minutes into the game and pulled off 2 incredible goals to win the team the match and cement himself as a regular starter. But no matter what, 21 matches, 4 goals and 3 assists later, it was time for the 18-year-old to join the biggest club in the world, and it quickly dawned on him that he was back to square one. Before he even left Brazil, he had Clarence Seedorf himself sounding the alarms on live TV, claiming that he won't even play there. It's a completely different level. With luck, maybe he'll get a loan off to a club like Porto. Even Eto'o didn't perform at Real when he was 18, so he got kicked out. And he wasn't far off. When Vinícius got to Real, not only were the same problems still there, but it seemed the pressure had made it all 10 times worse. In his presentation, he couldn't even do a couple kick-ups without messing it up, and when they gave him his debut in a friendly versus United, no matter how much he kept dribbling, there was no end product, and so they decided he'd start the season splitting his time between their under-19s and the B team. As you might imagine, the Barcelona fans found this hilarious. They thought they had deceived Real into splashing a fortune on a nobody, but then Vini scored 4 in his first 5 matches with the B team, so Zidane gave him a start in the Copa del Rey and he pulled off 2 assists as well as the Man of the Match award, so he subbed him in late in the game after that, and he got himself a goal, becoming the youngest to score for Real since Raul himself. But trust me, it didn't stop there. The next match, he became the 3rd youngest Real Madrid player to ever debut in the Champions League and even got an assist. By December, he was playing in the Club World Cup final, and by the start of the next year, they made him the youngest regular starter in the history of the club. And before you knew it, Brazil were calling him up. But just as it seemed he had finally proven everyone wrong and could, catch a break, he ruptured the ligaments in his ankle and was gone for months. This really messed him up. Recovery wasn't easy. Suddenly Vini was performing worse than ever. The fans were booing him, and after 8 months without scoring, he literally fell on his knees, crying his eyes out when he finally found the net. But by then, the memes had reached Spain. It was no longer just the Brazilian commentators claiming that he never deserved to be called up to the national team, demanding that some random guy go in his place. Now, he had the Spanish pundits coming after him, constantly accusing him of being a diver and a cheat, and the worst of all, he had lost the trust of his own teammates. With Real going into penalties at the Spanish Super Cup, the cameras caught Ramos looking around to see who'd want to take the first penalty, and despite the fact Vini was the only one to put his hand up, not only did they ignore him, but Kroos suggested that Rodrigo take it instead. And with with Vini's numbers steadily going down, by his third season, things reached an unbelievable low, with Benzema being caught by the cameras telling Mendy, "Don't pass him the ball, on my mother's life, he is playing against us." One of the outright leaders of the squad, one of the players who should have been on his side helping him stay on track, was conspiring against him. Even with Hazard performing substantially worse and costing the club almost 3 times as much, Vini was the most hated player in the club, and next season it became quite clear what that was. You see, Vini is different from other players. Spending 5 years in the spotlight like that could have broken anyone's spirit, but Vini never stopped for a second. He kept working, waiting for his moment, and then Ancelotti arrived and made Vini a new man. Like night and day, his decision-making went from horrible to elite. Suddenly, Vini was one of the most consistent performers on the planet, and ironically, he and Benzema joined forces to become the best attacking duo on the planet. Now, whenever Benzema opened his mouth to talk about him, all he had to say was that Vini was a phenomenon. It was 5 goals and 2 assists in the first 6 league matches of the season. The next month, he was named the best player at Real Madrid, and by November, he was the league's player of the month. And so, it started. Those who had come after him so harshly in the past couldn't use his poor performances as an excuse anymore, so they went after the color of his skin. It started in El Clasico, and a month later, even the Mallorca fans were imitating monkey sounds whenever he touched the ball. But once again, as horrific as it may have seemed, Vini persevered. In that very same match against Mallorca, he took the man of the match. With Real in the second leg against PSG trailing 2 goals behind, he was involved in all 3 goals they pulled back. Against Chelsea, he assisted the opener and the last-minute winner. Even when he got subbed in with 1 minute left in their match against Osasuna, he still managed to get an assist. And no matter what, there were pundits back in Brazil insisting that he was nothing special, that if Hazard was still in his prime, he wouldn't even get on the pitch at all. So, you know what he did? He went in against Man City and scored a decisive away goal as they went on to clutch the match in the last minute, and once in the final, he scored the one and only goal of the match, handing Real Madrid La Decimocuarta, and not only becoming the youngest South American to ever score in a Champions League final, but the first under-21 player to be involved in 10 Champions League goals in a single season since Lionel Messi. As they say, Vini, Vidi, Vici. And yet, when UEFA named the best player in Europe, it wasn't even that he wasn't on the podium, he was 9th on the list. While everyone celebrated Benzema, even handing him the Ballon d'Or, once the next season started, all that Vini got was more hate than ever. Now the Spanish pundits were getting upset that he danced after scoring his goals, telling him to stop monkeying around. Whenever he complained, the captain of Mallorca came out claiming that he uses racism as an excuse for everything. And by January, only a few weeks before he went on to take the Player of the Tournament award at the Club World Cup, a makeshift voodoo doll of himself was hung by the neck in a bridge in Madrid. By the time he met Mallorca again, the defenders were so harsh with him they literally broke the record for the most tackles ever in a La Liga match, with almost half of them having been aimed at Vinícius. Even when the match against Osasuna was stopped for a minute in respect to the victims of the earthquake in Turkey, the silence was interrupted by dozens of fans yelling slurs at Vini. Betis, Barça, Valencia, from that moment on the insults came every match. Vini was the best player in the country, and they hated him for it. But too bad for them, he only kept on getting better. From January onwards, he went on a run of 27 goal contributions in 26 matches and kept pulling off one miracle performance after the other. From being 2 goals down to Liverpool and coming back to win 5-2 while being involved in 4 of the goals, to losing the first leg of the Copa del Rey semi-finals at home, and then scoring and being involved in 2 other goals at the Camp Nou to beat them 4-0. And eventually, not just pulling off 2 assists against Chelsea to make himself the competition's top assist provider, but scoring Real's only goal as they got knocked out by eventual champions Man City, leapfrogging the phenomenon himself in the Champions League goal-scoring charts. And still, just as it seemed it was time to celebrate, the situation got dire. In the second to last match of the season, the game had to be stopped, as the Valencia supporters simply would not stop yelling racist chants at Vinícius. And to make matters worse, towards the end of the match, when Vinícius faced the fans yelling slurs at him, a Valencia player tried to stop him, eventually putting him in a chokehold, leading Vinícius to strike him as he tried to free himself, to which the referee decided the appropriate behavior would be to send off Vinícius instead. While all the league's very own president had to say about it was that La Liga is not racist. And if it wasn't disappointing enough that would be the end of his season, then UEFA made sure to leave out Vini while he nominated the likes of McAllister and Jesus Navas to the UEFA Player of the Year award. But worry not, because a year later, even through injuries, even with Vini himself admitting that racism is killing his love for football, he scored or assisted against every team he faced, leading Real to the Champions League final once again. And with the fans now starting to chant Vini Ballon d'Or during their matches, I have one message for Dortmund: be very, very scared.